Has someone ever invited you to hang out with them, or maybe invited you to go somewhere and you said yes? Maybe you felt pressured or obligated to go, or maybe you even felt like you owed them one. Once the time of the event started to roll around, you started to have this regret settle in where you were questioning why you even said yes in the first place. Last week, we talked about the attitude of identity, and today we're going to be talking about the behavior of boundary setting. Before we even jump into this, we need to understand one very, very, very important thing. That your yeses and nos are the most valuable thing that you own. Matthew chapter 5, verse 37 says, "But let your yes be yes and your no be no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one." So let's define what a boundary is. I find that this concept of boundaries is one that a lot of people will say that they get it, but they don't really understand it. And there's even counselors that don't fully understand the whole concept of what a boundary is. So I want to break this part down. So a boundary is a limit or guideline that a person sets to define what they are comfortable with and how they want others to behave towards them. It helps establish a sense of personal space, protect emotional well-being, and create healthy relationships by clarifying expectations and responsibilities. There are 5 different types of boundaries: physical, emotional, sexual, material, and time. For today's episode, the one boundary we're going to really be focusing on is the boundary of time. So the big question is, how do I know where to set a boundary when it comes to my time? And there's 2 ways to do this. One, you need to have a high level of self-awareness. We talked about this in a previous episode of having the mindset of self-awareness. And this is where self-awareness really bleeds into some of the other areas of attitude. And here we're talking about behaviors. The second thing you need is the ability to recognize and identify the things that contribute or take away from your purpose. Without these 2 factors, it would be virtually impossible to set appropriate and effective boundaries.
So as you're growing in your identity and you're learning these 2 factors about yourself, you can now begin to develop the behavior of boundary setting. And here are 3 realizations that will help you develop this behavior. Realization number 1, when you know who you are and where you're going, boundaries become automatic. As Alexis said, the 2 most important things that you have are your yeses and nos. And what we need to realize that most people don't is that with every yes, automatically comes 1,000 no's. Picture this. The day I proposed to Alexis, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my wife, and she tearfully and joyfully said yes. Now, what if the next day another man got down on his knee and asked Alexis to be his wife, and she tearfully and joyfully said yes? Her yes to that other man would invalidate her yes to me. With every yes comes 1,000 automatic no's. Her yes to me means that she's saying no to literally every other man on the planet. And same vice versa, I should add. But where a lot of people get caught up in this feeling of dread when they have to follow through on yeses that they've given is because they didn't realize they gave a yes that was in contradiction to another yes that they gave. As you're figuring out who you are and what your purpose is, the direction that the Lord is leading you in this life, you're going to be saying yes to those things. Yes to this is who I am. Yes to this is why I was made. And those yeses come with 1,000 or even 1,000,000 no's. And you have to know what they are. I met a very successful businessman years ago. This is someone who is highly sought after for mentorship from many, many people. And he said this: "My love is unconditional, but my time is very conditional." I'll love you no matter what. I'll root for you. I'll cheer for you. But I'm going to be very selective with who I choose to give my time to because I only have so much of it to give.
We also have to realize that only we have the ability to add value to our yeses. We also have the ability to take value away from our yeses. Like the example Derek gave about the proposal, if I'm saying yes to everyone, that means I am lessening the value of my yes. But if I only say yes to one person, that skyrockets the value of my yes. During our first year of marriage, Derek and I were getting invitations to birthday parties, to weddings, and other social events. And it got to a point where Derek and I really had to sit down and consider the cost of our yeses to these events. And it wasn't that we didn't love the people who were inviting us. We love the people that were inviting us. But Derek and I understood that we had an assignment and we were running the race that we were called to run. And in order to do that, we have to be careful with where we give our time because our time is so limited. So this resulted in us creating a filter system where if we got a birthday invitation, a wedding invitation, a social gathering invitation, we would run that decision through our filter. And we would have to ask ourselves, does this contribute to our purpose or does this distract from our purpose? So there were lots of yeses and there were also lots of noes. But we knew that we were adding value to the yeses that we were giving. And that's something that we've continued to implement even now in our marriage.
Realization number 2. Other people will not respect your boundaries until you do.
When I teach about boundaries in the therapeutic world, I always tell people, you are the best teacher to teach others about yourself. When you understand your boundaries, when you understand why your yeses are yeses and why your noes are noes, only you could teach them how to respect it by you respecting it first.
It's almost like when you make a decision to set a boundary that the world backs up and says, oh, you think you know who you are and where you're going? Prove it.
And the purpose of boundaries is really to protect you. Because if you're on assignment, if you're running after the purpose that God has for you, you better believe that the enemy will capitalize on the fact that you don't have boundaries. I'm sure you could think of a person in your life who doesn't have boundaries, and when you look at their life, it is chaotic. It is so chaotic. There's a quote that says, if there's chaos in someone's life, there's a very high likelihood that they don't have boundaries.
And this would be a great point to also add that time boundaries aren't meant just to exist with other people. We can have time boundaries with ourselves. Like, it's probably a good idea if you have a high calling in your life that you shouldn't watch 20 hours of football every weekend.
Please don't do that. Football's not even that great.
No. So time boundaries, yes, are meant to have with other people. If it's stealing away from us running our race, there's also a lot of behaviors that we need to set boundaries with ourselves. And that doesn't mean cut them out completely. I enjoy sitting down and watching a football game as much as the next guy, but I set limitations for myself. And the reason that you need to enforce those boundaries with yourself, especially when you don't want to, is to prove to yourself that you do remember who you are and you do remember why you were called and you do remember where you're going. Which leads to realization number 3. Compromised boundaries equal compromised identity. John chapter 1 verse 5 says that the light shines in darkness and the darkness does not comprehend it. There's this popular song that I know some of you may like it, and there's parts of it that I think are good, but there's this one line that I really think is contrary to what this scripture is saying. It says, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. I don't agree with that. If you walk in a room and flip on the light switch, the darkness doesn't tremble. As soon as light shows up, the darkness is gone. The two cannot coexist. Light doesn't fight with darkness. It doesn't battle with darkness. They are so contrary that as soon as light comes on the scene, the darkness has to go. Now, compare this to our boundaries. Let's say that saying yes to your identity is saying yes to light, which means that you're saying no to darkness, and you instituting a boundary with all of the no's that automatically come with that yes is you saying no to the darkness. Now, if you compromise and start letting darkness in here and there, light does not know how to mingle with darkness. It's either all or nothing. And if you start compromising those boundaries, you're going to start compromising your identity. I want to tackle some of the resistance to boundary setting that people have. And usually it's a little bit of guilt. People feeling like, oh, but I don't want to cut these people out of my life. I love these people. I feel like, from our opening statement, I feel like I owe them my time or my effort or my energy. Understand this. The best thing that you can do for the people that you love is to become everything that you were created to be. And you can only become everything that you were created to be if you allow your no's to validate your yeses. The reality is, you're really no good to the people that you love if you stay on the same level. And there's a great quote that I love. If you say that you love people and you want to help them, win. There's nothing that will bless the people that you love more than you becoming everything that you were created to be, removing excuses, and how they can live up to their identity too. So move forward into your identity. Say yes to everything that you are, and say no to everything that you are not. God bless.
Happy fasting.